Hi, welcome back to the fifth one. We've got this picture which we reworked in the previous episode. Now I'm going to paint it. I'm going to use acrylics to do this. So I've got my acrylic palette here. I've got white and black. I've got blue, turquoise, sap green, leaf green, cadmium yellow, cadmium yellow dark, yellow ochre and burnt sienna. So those are the colours that I'm going to use on this picture, and here I've got the two knives that I'm going to use. My 6x1 palette knife, which is my favourite weapon of choice, and a small pointed one here for picking out some detail. Don't need very much because it's a fairly small picture. I've also excuse me, I've obviously sealed this again, so there's no more colour coming off it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight in with the turquoise and just put some turquoise around this apple and just start to build in and work on the colour scheme here. I'm going to work fairly quickly. Not going to keep you too long on this. This is just more of a quick exercise to show you how to do it rather than specifically spending a lot of time actually doing it. I'm going to wipe the blade in places again just to get some of the paint off it, but also, as you know, because I like to keep moving the colours around the picture. So there's the first colour. I'm going to come back in with a sap green while it's still wet and just work it over the top. It's nice because it's blending at the same time. It's giving us quite a nice textural effect here on the apples, and it's working out the light and shade for me simply by using that. So I'm going to come straight round into the apple green sap. There we go. That's rather a nice effect that we've managed to get there. If I can cut in on that bit. Now, we didn't have to think too hard about this because I've already done all the exercise in terms of light and shade, structure and colour. We've already done previously, so we're just really working on the forms and just making sure we got some colour sorted out there. Doesn't matter about picking up other bits of colour as you go. A little bit of splotted colour in there that looks quite nice. Adds a little bit of extra life to the form. And as I did with when I was using the charcoal with my fingers, I'm following the form of the apples to try to make sure that I'm getting that peel effect at the same time. So we're keeping these. You can see the lines that have developed on the apple here as we've gone through it. So make sure I'm keeping those lines working. That gives us a sense of the feel of the apple. Just going to wipe the blade out here in a few places. Don't worry over much about it. It's cleaned it up. I'm going to come back in and start on the pears. Now we use some sienna at the bottom of the pears here. We had it on the table here too. That was quite nice, wasn't it? But we put in the sienna in here for the bottom of the pears, and into here, cutting back into that turquoise. I'm then going to come in with the yellow ochre and just put that a bit over the top of the sienna. Again, starting to think about the form of the pear, so I'm starting to actually structure it a little bit more. With the pear, get that out of there. We can come back and tidy that up in just a mo. A little bit more on this pear here. Bit in here just to give it a bit of walking around the picture. A little bit into the apple because I quite like that colour in the apple there. And clean the knife. There. Coming back in then with the cadmium yellow hue. I'm going to come back in. It's giving me a bit more light on these pears. It's dealing with the light side of the pears there. It's giving me slightly more of a pear shape. Bring a little bit more of that in here. A bit in the background. Oh, that's a bit yellowy. Come back to the ochre on that, I think. Bring in a bit of ochre in the background there. Then I'm going to come back with the cadmium green and I'm going to mix in a little bit of ochre because I want to knock it back a little bit. So I've just rough mixed those two together, and the cadmium green gives me a nice, with the yellow ochre mixed in, gives me a nice sort of pear colour, I think. Wipe that around there. Come back in over here with this one, and a little bit more in here on this one. Wipe it out. So we've got a little bit more structure coming into the picture. We need to start thinking a little bit more about rendering the background. I'm just going to come in neat with the Prussian blue and just build it through. A bit more neat Prussian blue over here. Pick up the shape of this pear, making this pear a little bit smaller because I think it was a little bit on the big side before. So I just cut it back in there with the knife, clean that bit out. Still a little bit on the large side, so I'm going to cut it back in just a bit more. That's better. Picking in the colours here now. Wipe this blade back around here. Down the side of the apple just there, and then into the shade. We'll come round into the shade here, build that across. And use the blue to give me the shade here, because I want to end up with a very bright, Fauvist almost picture. I'm going to come back in here, cut that in, up there, like that. Then into the shadows in the bottom here. And a little bit more in the background behind these pears, or this pear rather, here. Cut that back into shape. Okay. I need to address this foreground, this blob of colour here. I'm going to come back in with a bit more turquoise in there because I think it's just a nice colour to add a little bit of depth to the picture. This foreground here, I'm going to treat that in white. So I'm going to get rid of this turquoise off my knife. Go back with a clean knife. And again, we've got this issue with the white apple here, so I'm going to have to think about rendering this. We used it in brown before, but I quite like the effect of the Prussian blue. So I'm going to cut the Prussian blue back into there. And across the top of the apple. And then I'm going to work the rest in with white, and I'll cut in the bottom here with the knife as well, and that will give me a little bit more structure, I think, to that. And I'll come back and put the white on it. Clean the knife again. I'm just going to pick up some raw white, titanium white here. Oh, it's a very bright colour, isn't it? Okay, what I'll do is I'll pick up some of this blue and we'll just mellow it down a little bit. So we're cooling it down. I'm not worried too much about getting up too many other bits of colour in there. It just gives me a nice surface to work on. Wipe it back across here. And you can see it's picking up some of the colour from underneath, which is giving it a variety of other colours. It makes it look a little bit more cloth-like, and it's bluing it down a little bit. It's cooling it off. It's not quite as vibrant as it was. If I pass the knife over the top again, I can smooth out some of the darker marks, but that gives me an much more interesting texture to that surface. If I come back in here, cut back up onto the apple, pass along there, and in here I'll come back in, and as you see, because I've got the blue on the knife, it's giving me a different colour of white. So that when I put the white on the apple, hopefully it's going to come out as a cleaner white. Let's smooth that through. So we've got an interesting composition coming on now. I'll clean the knife again and pick up a little bit of cadmium yellow, this cadmium yellow here, and mix that with the white. So I'm going to get a very pale but bright yellowy white, which I'm going to put in for the apple here. Whoops, put in for the apple here. if I move that through here for the apple, you can see a contrast between the apple itself and the background, which makes for an interesting, more interesting statement. If I come back in here with this apple, we'll pick that up in white with the cadmium yellow in it as well, and come back in here, and that gives me again a much more interesting sort of shape and form to this apple. There, so that's giving me my apple shape, and it's quite a different colour, that yellowy white to this blue white. I'll pick up a little bit of the burnt sienna and mix it into the white, because I want to put in the edge of the table here in shade. So I just put that through here. It gives me a drop on my cloth, which defines my table edge a little bit better. Now we've got no highlights on these apples, so if I come through, I'm going to pick up this yellowy white, this cadmium yellow and white, and introduce a little bit of highlight onto some of the fruit. And if I come back with the dark cadmium yellow, this dark cadmium yellow with a little bit of white, and put that onto the pear, you can see a bit more white in there. You can see that it's giving me a different type of highlight. I'll just put that across the top of the pears. So that's giving me, and I'll put a little bit in there, that's giving me a slightly different effect. I'm going to introduce a little bit of yellow into the base of it here, just to brighten it up a bit. Right, the last thing I want to do is just add a few structural lines to it, which I'm going to use black for. I'm going to use the black here, and I'm going to cut it with this smaller knife. I use a small knife here, and I'm going to come in and just work on this apple a little bit, and just tease the lines through for the apple. And this apple here, just to give it a little bit of structure. And then I've got the things like the pips of the ends of the pears, and also we've got the stalk of the apple. The way to do the stalk that I found is put the knife on at the angle you want it, and then twist the far end, the top end, and it gives you a shape that resembles a tapering thread. So if I come up here and do this one with this one, you can see we'll have it here. I just do that. It just gives me a stalk shape to the apple. I'll come back in here. I'll put one on the end of this one. A little bit large, pick it out, and this one here. Now remember before when we did these, we had trouble because we couldn't see them. So I'm going to revert to the burnt sienna and white. Going to go to the burnt sienna and white. I'm sorry about my phone going off. That's pretty awful. I'm going to revert to the burnt sienna and white and just put an edge in there and an edge in there, and that gives me a little bit more. Pick it out a little bit more there. It just gives me a little bit more sense of the stalk. I'll come back in for the pear here and just work the same way. I'm going to come back. Whoops. Put a bit more black in under the fruit here just to define it a little bit more, and a little bit in here just to give us a bit more shape around the bit of white on the end there. Just come back in with a palette knife and just get rid of that with the black. So that's giving me a little bit more structure to the definition of the fruit, the shadowy parts of the fruit, and hopefully that gives us a little bit more of a structure to our picture. The last one here, this apple here, that will do me. Lost a little bit of the edge of this apple, so I'm going to come back in with a bit more of the turquoise that I had previously and just redefine that apple edge there. Okay, so there we go. I can now carry on working on this to my heart's content, or I can just leave it and treat it as a complete picture. What I'll do is I'll just put the frame around it. We can just have a quick look at what we've got with that. So there we are. That's the picture, worked up in acrylic with a palette knife. I hope you found that interesting. Oops! I hope you found that interesting. Again, if there's any comments, just drop me a note, and I'll endeavour to get back and answer them for you. But I hope you can see now how we've gone from actually posing the fruit in the first instance to charcoal, to pastel, to recomposition, through to a final piece of work, which is an impasto palette knife acrylic painting. Thank you.